Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where it is that you are watching from. Welcome back to Facing Reality. It's me, January, and today we are continuing the trial of Mark Redwine. He is the father of Dylan Redwine, who went missing back years and years ago. His dad was actually the one who reported him missing. And later, Dylan's remains were found in the wooded mountainous terrain behind his father's home. Ultimately, Mark was convicted of his murder. This is his trial. We've been watching it together. Those of you that have been here with me, I greatly appreciate you. Just to check in with the chat. Good morning, Gail. Good to see you. I hope you had a wonderful Memorial Day. I was able to spend a lot of time with my kids, did some work, all that fun stuff. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. That way you'll know when I go live. Turn on your notification bell, because I would love for you guys to be here with me every day. All these days that we go through this trial together, we are, developing a great community of people who rally behind these children who desperately need justice. So without further adu, I want to show you, this is a small clip from the Dr. Phil show. Mark, Elaine, both of those are Dylan's parents, and his brother Cory, all went on the Dr. Phil show. And we can't show all of it because how Dr. Phil and the copyrights and all that good stuff. But this is just a little clip of Cory saying he believed Mark was responsible, and him and Elaine, his mom, they believed early on. So here we go. Also, let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Make sure everything's good.
I think Mark has something to do with it. I think he's either got him heading out or, done something and disposed. I strongly think that he's involved.
Why?
He hasn't done a single thing since Dylan has been gone.
Why do you say that? What has he not done?
He hasn't been to any of the benefits. He wasn't there for Dylan's birthday vigil. He hasn't helped at all with the Find Missing Dylan Redwine Fund.
And that's offensive to you?
Very.
Dr. Phil, I'd like to make a comment about the fundraiser thing. I have several people in the community in which I live that are reaching out to me on a daily basis, can volunteer in their time to have some involvement with a fundraiser. But somebody from this side of the room called her and told her that they didn't want her to have any involvement in anything that had anything to do with raising money and didn't want me involved in any of that.
You're wrong, and you know you're wrong. If you want to raise money for Dylan's fund and for the reward, then do it. Why does it have to be everybody else's responsibility?
It's not everybody else's responsibility.
Why can't you go do something on your own? Why do you got to have our approval?
You say he has clear motivation. What do you mean?
Dylan didn't really look up to Mark. They had a relationship, but it was never what Dylan had wanted. It was always what Mark had wanted, which was always to be on the road. Really? Never there.
Why do you call your father Mark instead of Dad or
Because he's not a father to me. A father is someone who cares for their kids and, would do anything for him. Be a role model, someone to look up to.
I believe that you're being very disrespectful, and I believe that everything that's coming out of your mouth is perpetuated by your mother.
I have my own mouth. I can say my own words.
Then use it.
I am at you. I don't like you. I hate you, and you have been nothing of a father since the last 10 years. And Dylan's birthday, even though he's not here to celebrate it with us, where were you? You sure?
I was making every effort I possibly could because I was in Texas working for the company that I work for, trying to get into Bayfield.
And you're the only
that
one
night.
working. I'm not working and doing that stuff too?
So that got a little bit heated. This is a great, I think it was actually 2 full episodes. I highly recommend if you can try to find it. There's a couple channels that kind of have it hidden in there because, you get in trouble if you play it. But man, you can watch it clip by clip, but it's not as good. I actually watched the whole entire thing and, man, Mark's a piece of work, guys. He really is. All right, let's go ahead and get straight into it. So on Friday when we left, we went through and did pause. Hold on. We had went through the prosecution with Cory. Now we're going to get straight into the defense. I wanted to keep all of this together so we can see it all at once. You guys doing all right out there?
First of all, good morning.
You can't stand there, sure you can't see what's going on.
Beg your pardon. Thank you. So, just to the south of your father's house is the bridge, right?
Yes.
And you can cross that bridge, and once you cross that bridge, over the river, correct?
Yes.
And that bridge is less than perhaps a football field down the road from you guys.
Yes.
And when you cross that bridge, and you head a little bit to the north, there's a trail and signs marking that trail that lead you to a waterfall, and then further up Middle Mountain. Come on, you ever explored that area?
I have not.
Okay. You're aware of that trail, the signs, and the rest of it?
I was not. I have never walked that trail.
Mr. Redwine, do you remember that at some point during the investigation and early on that you were asked to look at photos of your father's living room?
Yes.
And you advised it looked like it usually did, right?
Yes.
You also told law enforcement that it would not be unusual for Dylan to fall asleep on the couch, right?
Yes.
You've also made a statement to law enforcement, and this would have been fairly early on, that Dylan would not fight your dad. He would walk away, right?
Yes.
What you informed them was that Dylan would cool off and walk away, correct?
Yes.
Dylan told you that Mr. Redwine got the pictures that have been discussed and published to the jury on the trip to Boston, right?
Yes.
And I know this was a long time ago. I've got methods of refreshing your recollection if that's necessary, but do you recall that back on November 20th, you're in Durango because you've heard your brother's missing, right?
Yes.
And that was just after your 21st birthday on November 14th, 2012?
Yes.
And that was the last time you and Dylan had communicated, at least by text message, right?
Yes.
On that November 20th date, do you remember meeting with an investigator, Patterson?
Yes.
That day, you did not believe, quote, that your dad, Mark, would ever hurt Dylan, right?
Yes.
In May of 2012, you and your father got into a big fight over something that was happening at his house with you and your friends, right?
It was me and my wife.
Okay. What your dad was concerned about, and you guys had a disagreement, a verbal disagreement, was that while he was out of town working for weeks, you were staying at his house, right?
Yes.
And he was upset.
Objection, may we approach?
Yes.
Mr. Redwine, please listen carefully to Mr. Moran's questions and only answer the exact question he's asking, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Redwine, I'm speaking specifically about May 2012. You and your father had a verbal disagreement, correct?
That sounds correct.
You were staying out at his house with your girlfriend, right?
Yes.
And Mark said you and your girlfriend were, quote, messy, right?
I can't recall for certain, but that sounds about right.
And after that disagreement where he was not pleased with the condition that his house was left in as you were staying there, after that disagreement, you two hadn't spoken from May of 2012 until January of 2013, right?
Yes.
And part of what was sort of convenient about your father's house was that his work required him to be out of town so you could have the place to yourself, right?
Yes.
In the spring of 2012, so before this contention around messiness, that was the spring that you cut yourself hiking while you were at your dad's place, right?
I can't recall for certain the date I cut myself, but I know it was in that time frame.
Would it refresh your recollection as to the general season and year if I showed you a report written about it that was closer in time?
Yes.
An approach.
You may.
Bring here to Discovery.
Speak up.
I'm referring to page 226 of Discovery.
So this discovery is important to the defense because the blood remnants that was left over, that was found in Mark's home, in his living room, on the coffee table, the floor, the sofa, there were I can't remember if it was the floor. We'll find out. But there were a few pieces where they could not exclude Cory. Now, keep in mind, not only could they not exclude Cory, they also could not exclude Mark or Dylan. So the three being biological, blood, father and sons, they weren't able to fully exclude them. And so the defense is going to come in and say, hey, that was Cory. He cut himself. That's where that blood came from. It wasn't Dylan's, even though there was 100% matches to Dylan in other areas.
So, think about line 26.
I like that Cory's like really reading this.
Is your memory refreshed with respect to the general season
Yes.
that this occurred? Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Mr. Redwine, my recollection is that your testimony with Mr. Johnson from the prosecution was that you'd gotten a scrape while you were in the woods, right?
Yes.
Was that a different scrape than this cut to your finger that you were just reading about?
No.
Okay. So those are the same thing.
Yes.
And there was enough of a wound that you were that you had to bandage it, correct?
Yes.
You recall that there was another occasion where you vomited at your dad's house, right?
Yes.
I want to switch gears a
Of
little bit
course,
here and
it's my
talk
dad.
with you about the last conversation you had with your brother. You made fun of Dylan for having to go to your dad's house, right?
I was teasing with him about it, yes.
Is there a difference in your mind between making fun and teasing?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall speaking with an investigator Goldbright in November of 2013?
Yes.
And do you recall that she asked you questions about your last interaction with your little brother?
Yes.
And do you recall stating to her that you were, quote, making fun of Dylan for having to go to Mark's house?
Yes.
You and your mom encouraged Dylan to tell your father that Dylan did not want to be with him before he left for Thanksgiving?
We told Dylan he should voice his feelings to his father.
You gave him advice on how to avoid having to go to his dad's house in the future, right?
No, not how to not go to his house.
The Thanksgiving
Defense
planned
makes me
in
angry
Colorado Springs
sometimes.
was going to involve friends and family, correct?
Yes.
Dylan was aware that there was a gathering planned for your mom's house, right?
Yes.
Fair to say that Dylan liked Colorado Springs because there were stores and restaurants and things he liked to do there?
A little bit. He also liked outdoors too, so.
You remember discussing with law enforcement that Dylan, when Dylan was young, he was really close to Mark.
Yes.
They had a really tight bond.
Yes.
The first couple of years, your father was at home with Dylan, right?
Yes, he was a stay-at-home dad and watched Dylan during the day.
Let me pause for just a second. Yeah, he did have a good relationship with his dad until he saw him eating poop out of a diaper. Oh my gosh. Everything freaking changed at that moment.
And that established a special bond between them, as you observed.
Yes.
It would upset your little brother when your dad spoke badly about your mom and yourself, right?
Yes. I wasn't there, so I can't tell you exactly how Dylan's reaction was, but based just kind of on how he responded to it, he would get upset by it, yeah.
So when Dylan was hearing things that caused him to think, when Dylan was hearing things that about how you or your mom, in your father's eyes, were bad influences, that upset Dylan, correct?
Yes.
On that occasion, when Dylan was on a road trip with your father and he called you while you were at the movies, when he finally got on the phone with you, it was difficult to understand and he was upset.
Yes.
And on that occasion, he was discussing how he was upset because of the discussion about being bad influences, your mom and yourself.
Yes.
And you could hear Mr. Redwine in the background, your father, Mr. Redwine.
Yes.
In December of 2012, you met with your father and your half-brother, Brandon Redwine, at the casino, correct?
Yes.
That discussion was in part to talk about ongoing search efforts.
Yes.
You had a recorder.
Yes.
You told your father he was suspect to you, right?
Yes.
And that's the language your mom used as well, correct?
Yes.
You acknowledge that you remember roughhousing with him, right?
With Dylan or with Mark?
With Mark.
Hearsay. One thing, if he recalls it,
It's another if we're going to talk about a conversation that implicates self-serving hearsay to the defendant.
I think you can just ask, do you remember? And then if you get a different answer, you can get into the conversation, Mr. Moran.
Do you remember talking with your father about roughhousing that happened between yourself and your father?
Yes.
That's objection. That's not the way I told you to do it. But it's in. I think you can get it in anyway. We'll see what happens next.
You acknowledged throwing the football with your father, right?
No, don't ask it that way. That's what the objection is. Do you remember throwing the football with your father? Then if he doesn't answer it the way you think he should, then you impeach him just the way it's been done earlier today. Okay?
Thank you. My efforts at expediting, I will relax. Do you remember throwing the football with your father?
Yes.
A Nerf football?
Vaguely, but yes.
And that would be done inside the house, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember being asked not to interfere with searches going on up in Vallecito?
Yes.
And that was something that law enforcement asked of you, right?
Yes.
And you decided not to listen to that advice, right?
No.
Do you remember saying you didn't listen to the advice to go up there to your dad on that meeting at the casino?
I remember saying they asked us to stay down in Durango, and we, after the full day of searching, went up to the lake after everybody had cleared out.
Okay. Do you remember that you said that you snuck off to go do searches?
Not specifically, no.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at a transcript of the recording?
Yes.
Permission to approach.
You may.
I'm referring here to line 32 on page 2530. It refreshes your recollection. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Sir, does it refresh your recollection?
Yes.
So your father is saying that he was told...
Objection, hearsay.
This is effect on the listener.
I'm sorry, what?
This is effect on the listener. The truth of the matter is not why I'm seeking to elicit this. It informs...
You just refreshed his memory. Why don't you just ask him
Sure.
about that?
I'm getting ahead of myself. You were told, don't go up there and interfere, right?
Yes.
And you snuck off and went and did it anyway, right?
Yes, we went up there.
And your father said that he was told he needed
Objection,
to stay at home in
hearsay.
case he called.
Hold on.
And I want to approach Judge.
I think that is hearsay. I don't see that being the effect of the listener.
It informs why he had to sneak off.
That's not why you're trying
I'd like to
introduce
approach
it.
Your Honor.
That's not why you're trying to introduce it. You can't ask that question.
I'll move on.
Do you want to approach for some different issue?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, come on up.
I'd like to approach, Your Honor, the defense is getting on my nerves. Just kidding. Let's speed through it a little bit. You don't want to sit for their sidebars. You don't want to sit for their sidebars. Dang, it's like forever long. I don't want to miss anything, so I'm trying to go just a few seconds at a time.
Are you now aware of a friend who lives by the marina at Bayfield by the name of Tristan Reed?
I've heard of him, but I've never met him, or I didn't know about him until after Dylan. I've heard of him, but I've never met him, or I didn't know about him until after.
I'm going to switch gears here a bit, and I want to talk to you about observations you made in December of 2012. And one of the things that you'd mentioned was that your little brother was not as dependent as he used to be, that he was sort of spreading his wings as a 13-year-old, right?
Yes.
Based on what you know of your little brother, it makes sense to you that he would have slept in the same clothes that you saw him in when he arrived, or that we all saw him in when he arrived.
When the clothes he was wearing on the trip down, yes.
This is uncomfortable to ask, and then I'll move on quickly, but do you recall announcing on the Dr. Phil show that you hate your father?
Yes.
And do you recall also that you told him that you hate him because your stepfather had done more for you and your brother?
Yes.
And you also recalled saying that your stepfather, Mike Hall, had taken you and Dylan hunting?
Yes.
And fishing?
Yes.
And do you recall that you have observed Dylan throwing the Nerf football at your brother, at your father?
Doesn't seem like he has much remorse
I
for it
remember
either.
vaguely playing
He probably
with the Nerf
hates him,
football in the house.
especially now.
Do you recall receiving a text message saying something about how you had gone too far in summer 2012?
Not specifically, no.
Do you recall text messages about partying and liquor bottles at the old house?
Vaguely, but yes.
And this was discussed on Direct, but just to reorient you, I'm talking here about August 5th, 2012. You recall exchanging some messages with Dylan while he was on his way to Boston to see the Red Sox?
Yes.
Moment, please.
It really truly is. For the sake of the trial, we're going to watch it, but trust me, I would love to just zoom past all of the defense, especially
You
because,
heard from Dylan,
we
and
know
you
that
said
he
was
was
in
convicted.
Illinois,
There's
right?
way entirely too much
While
evidence
he was in
out
Illinois,
there
that's when you asked him to get your
against Mark,
Yes.
but we'll watch it.
He was telling you to go to the old house and get the liquor bottles out of the trash cans, right?
Yes.
And he had photographs of those liquor bottles, like Dad did, what Dylan told you.
Yes.
And he'd look at those those images?
Yes.
Your response to that was, I've got some pics too, right?
Yes.
Reference the photographs that were displayed yesterday.
Yes.
And so that it's clear, what Dylan was suggesting to you is that he would be able to get into your dad's phone and delete those pictures for you.
Yes.
And he followed up saying that they were in the trash, meaning that he put those photographs in the trash on the phone.
I don't recall it that way. He just said that he would go in and get rid of the pictures, but I had.
So just so you know, what's taking place right now. Defense is up here cross-examining Cory Redwine, Dylan's brother, and at a point in time, Mark was in Dylan's ear on a, significant enough basis that it really bothered Dylan enough that Dylan would speak to Cory about it. But Mark would put down Elaine and Dylan, talk about them being a bad influence. Supposedly right now what we're hearing testimony about is a time when Cory lived up there with Mark, and Mark was gone. He was a truck driver, so he was gone a lot. And apparently Cory was not the best housekeeper, according to Mark. And Mark didn't like the way that he had left the home and, kind of trashed it, so to speak. And Mark was talking to Dylan about it, and I guess at one point there were liquor bottles or, alcohol bottles, and these were in the trash, and somehow there became pictures of it. I think Dylan maybe took the pictures. And so he was talking to Cory about it, like, hey, this is what Dad's saying, blah, 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 blah. And Cory kind of responds back, well, you may have pictures of these alcohol bottles, but he was like, I got some pictures too. So at the end of the day, maybe it wasn't the best influence to be drinking and, have a messy area, whatever, but neither is wearing a diaper and eating your own feces, Mark. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
That was Dylan's decision. I had nothing to do with that.
And there was some testimony yesterday about what was in the garbage cans were beer bottles. Dylan knew the difference between a liquor bottle and a beer bottle, right?
Yes.
What he said was liquor bottle.
Yes.
You told your dad that Dylan was the one who originally found the pictures, right?
Yes.
This whole thing occurred while Dylan and Mark were on a trip, just the two of them, somewhere between Bayfield and Boston, right?
What do you mean this whole thing? I don't understand the question.
Sure. This event where you sent some pictures to your father was while your father and Dylan were alone on a road trip from Bayfield to Boston.
I never sent any pictures to my father. At least that I recall.
You do not recall sending the pictures straight to your father?
No, I do not.
Do you recall speaking with an FBI agent by the name of Rooston?
Yes.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at the notes FBI agent Rooston wrote about your interaction with her?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
This is the FBI agent who interviewed Letitia, who we saw, through that trial. He will testify in this as well.
Agent Humphrey's report that you're showing him? Is that correct?
So he mentions the FBI agent Grusing and then gives him somebody else's report. Come on, defense. Do better. Do better.
Okay.
Commissioner approaching. Yes. Does that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
Would you also like to see the messages themselves?
Yes.
Commissioner approach. Yes. Is that sufficient time to review them?
Yes.
Approach. Yes. Has your recollection been refreshed?
Yes.
Mr. Redwine, while your father and Dylan were on that trip between Bayfield and Boston alone together, you sent those photographs, didn't you?
Yes.
And just to clarify, to who?
To Mark.
Okay, thank you.
On August 5th, 2012, when you sent those photographs, you also wrote some things, right?
Yes.
Said to your father, "Hey, beautiful." Right?
Yes.
You said, "You are what you eat. Look in the mirror," right?
Yes.
Called your dad out for judging you, correct?
Yes.
That was in part your reaction to Dylan saying you'd been called a bad example, right?
Yes.
And you said, "Oh, and sweetie, this is Cory," right?
Yes.
Told him to, quote, "eat shit."
Yes.
Told him he was a coward, correct?
Yes.
Called him a shit eater, right?
Yes.
You said, pull yourself to eat shit, right?
Yes.
You called him nasty.
Yes.
Said the pics were the nastiest thing you'd ever seen.
Yes.
Called him a shit-eating coward, right?
Yes.
Told him he was a sperm donor.
Yes.
Said you talk more shit than you eat, right?
Yes.
Told him to lick shit off your shoe.
Yes.
When you said that, he was all alone with Dylan on the drive from Bayfield headed towards Boston, correct?
Yes.
The response that you received was that your dad asked you not to hurt Dylan, right?
Yes.
He said, "Dylan doesn't deserve to be hurt anymore," right?
Yes.
He asked, "If you care about Dylan, why do you want to see him hurt," right?
Yes.
On the drive from...
Okay, I have to pause that. He said, "Eat it off my shoe." And you would like it. Wow. Okay. So I'm glad this is a whole refresher. And you're right, Gail, because he's not lying. Like this shit actually exists, right? Like these photos are real. And Mark got up there on the Dr. Phil show and was like, they're fabricated. Like I don't implying Photoshop, or like, how is that possible? I mean, don't make me pull him back up again. Ugh, like gross. So Queen Betty, he in August. So we're kind of getting that timeline of how this added up, right? September was when she got the custody and they went before the judge. She got like primary or whatever. But it was joint. And so he had to go. That was when Dylan talked to the judge and he said he had to go. August is when Cory and his girlfriend or whomever had been staying up there with the dad. The dad was in the truck, gone. Cory left the house a mess and left a bunch of beer bottles, liquor bottles, alcohol, whatever. And I guess it was all in the trash. And Dylan had some pictures of it. And the dad, Mark, he's talking crap to Dylan about his brother and his brother being a bad influence, et cetera, et cetera. So Dylan tells Cory about it. Cory gets pissed and sends those pictures to the dad and said, what did he say, Gail? Shit eater. He was like, you talk more shit than you eat. No, he didn't. Oh my gosh. Anyway, what the defense is trying to say is that this happened while Dylan was like alone in Boston with Mark. And so kind of a good one. I don't want to give no kudos, to the defense, but kind of a good one, because this is their way to get their foot in the door and say, like, look, you weren't that scared of him. You didn't think that he, like you didn't think about doing that could have put him in jeopardy, or his safety, in jeopardy. But anyway, but look at Cory's face. Can we appreciate that? He's probably, because if you remember how the courtroom looks, he's kind of like looking around. He's probably eye and eye to to Mark. Shit eater. Oh my gosh, this is crazy.
He said that those pics proved that you'd gone through his personal things, right?
Yes.
And then something about how you were a thief as a result,
Yes.
and that you were like your mom trying to hurt him.
Yes.
Thank you. I know that this wasn't easy. Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right. You have more than just a few minutes of redirect?
A few minutes, Your Honor.
Then?
Okay. Yeah.
Let's finish him up then.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Redwine, I want to start with something that defense counsel asked you. He asked you if you were on the Dr. Phil show and said that you hate your father. You remember that?
Yes.
And you said you hate your father at that time.
Yes.
Was that before or after Dylan went missing?
After.
Why were you upset with your father?
Because he was the last one to see Dylan.
Were you upset? You've talked a lot about the efforts that you put into finding your brother. Were you upset with the way your father responded to the situation?
Yes.
Were you concerned, knowing your father, with the way that he responded to the situation?
Yes.
Was it because of your own personal reasons that you said you hate your father, or because of what you believe?
And let me pause that really quick, because he's like, yeah, I told him I hate him, and I told him he could eat shit and die. Sorry, I'm cracking up over here. It's just, it's some things you have to laugh about, right? Like, we're over here facing reality in this world, and like the reality of Mark Redwine is that he did that stuff. And if you don't remember what the pictures look like, you can go on that playlist and check out these previous lives that we've done, because I've showed you them. I've showed you all three of them, and yuck.
Had happened in the case.
What happened in the case, and it's a mixture of both.
Both.
Yeah.
It's what led up to it, and then it's what you believe happened.
Yes.
Do you love your father?
Yes.
Do you wish you were here under different circumstances seeing your father?
Yes.
To this very day, how do you feel about him?
I still love him. I wish I didn't have to be here.
Who are you here for?
Yeah.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach? This has gone too far.
I'm going to strike that last.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you here about your father because of the way you feel about him, or are you here about the facts in this case?
Objection, Your Honor. Same objection. Move to strike. Permission to approach.
No, and overruled.
The things you said today about Dylan or about your father?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
The things you testified today. Are these things about your father, or these things about Dylan?
Objection, relevant form of the question.
Leave the objection.
Well, hold on. You have impeached this witness in terms of his beliefs and feelings towards his father to try and impeach his testimony. I think the DA isn't.
So I'm going to pause it really quick. The defense does not want this emotional business on the stand, right? Don't have him start crying. Don't have him, they don't want any of that. So defense is objecting, doing any and everything that he can to get this to stop. But I love it. The judge was kind of like, carry on.
Entitled to go back into it somewhat as to why he's here and to whether or not he testified consistent with his beliefs and feelings or other things. So go ahead.
Your Honor, if I may, then we will object bolstering.
Fine, you're overruled.
So, Mr. Redwine, let me ask you this question again. Are you here today because you hate your father, or are you here today to tell this jury about things involving your brother?
Your Honor, it's a different question every time. I feel obligated to object again.
All right, it's on the same line. I want him to answer this question, and that should be the end of it. At least this line of question.
Yes, Your Honor.
I am here for the facts in the case.
About your brother?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you about a couple other particular things that defense counsel asked you about. He talked about a trail by a waterfall, goes up Middle Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any knowledge of this trail?
No.
To your knowledge, does Dylan have any knowledge of this trail?
No.
Do you know how easy or difficult or anything about this trail?
No.
Dylan have hiking boots or coat or things like that when he was packing for this trip?
No.
Yes, this is
someone who would go off and hike?
No.
redirect.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, you were asked about the photos in the living room and whether it looked like it usually did. You remember that question?
Yes.
When was the last time you were in that living room?
And I can't remember specifically, but I know it was in 2012 sometime.
Would it have been, counsel referenced an argument in May? We had some photographs in April. Is that closer to the point in time when you would have last been in that living room?
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Okay. You were asked by both on direct and on cross-examination about a cut in the woods, right?
Yes.
Do you recall you spoke to a police officer about that, right?
Yes.
Did you know at the time why they were asking you if you'd ever been cut in that house?
No.
Okay. And you gave them the one example that you could think of?
Yeah, the only time that anything like that has happened in the house for me.
Now, when I showed you those pictures, said if this had been blood, could that be your blood? Does that make any sense in terms of that cut you described?
That the cut I had wouldn't have left anything close to what was on the floor.
Objection, foundation, what he's viewed as luminol, and that's
I understand your objection, and I'm going to sustain it. The jury's to disregard the last answer.
Can you just explain to the jury what kind of cut this was?
It was just a brief scrape. I just walked.
No, Debs, this is prosecution going back. So after he's done, Cory will be able to leave the stand.
Walked through, and on my hand, just right here, hit just a tree, and there's just a little cut right there, being on my hand, and then a spot where I touched a lot of things. I put a Band-Aid on it just to avoid any infection or stinging or anything like that.
So to give context to what counsel is asking you about, police come to you and they say, "Do you ever bleed? Do you remember anything about ever bleeding?" And that's the one example that you thought of and you gave it to them.
Yes.
An injury that's dripping blood all over the house, something like that.
No.
objection asked and answered, leading. Redirect is not just to do direct all over again.
Can you move on, please?
Yes, Your Honor. So, next topic that defense counsel referenced that I'd like.
Okay, and let me show you, because so earlier when the defense was talking to Cory and asking him about cutting his hand in the woods and he was like, it was a significant enough cut that you needed to bandage it. Is that correct? Okay, listen to how that sounds, right? Significant. It was bleeding enough that you had to bandage it. Now, when prosecution's going back over it, oh, hey, let's talk about that again. And now Cory's like, yeah, I put a Band-Aid on it, right? So like just your terminology and the words that you use, think of the picture that it makes you paint in your mind. And so that's what they're trying to do for the jury. And a good prosecutor will go back and, catch all of those little things and pull them out. And that's exactly what he's doing right here.
To reference is about whether you sent the pictures to your father. And did that refresh your recollection about sending pictures to your father?
Yes.
When did you do that?
I did it the night that Dylan had asked for the pictures.
So was it actually the next day, based on what you reviewed?
Objection. This is the prosecutor testifying. This is improper impeachment. He's leading. This is really problematic questioning. I can make it for the record if we don't. Court allows to approach.
No, I'm not going to let you approach on this. You are leading.
Yes, Your Honor.
And I know you're trying to just get through this fast, but the answer is that it was the next day. So go forward. Stop leading. Go ahead.
So you reviewed the documents to refresh your memory?
Yes.
Would you like defense counsel to bring the documents back to you to review again, or do you feel comfortable that it was the next day?
I feel comfortable it was the next day.
Why didn't you send them directly to Dylan?
Okay, listen to that even. How he just said that, and the way he changed up his voice. He made it sound as dramatic as he could. Just sit down, sir. Your client's guilty. Big time.
Being 13 years old, didn't want Dylan to have possession of those. I just didn't feel he was mature enough.
How about the idea given to him during an argument with his father? That's something you wanted to do?
No.
The last topic I want to ask you about is defense counsel talked to you about playing Nerf football in the house. You recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
And you have played Nerf football with Dylan in that living room?
Yes.
Anyone ever get injured playing Nerf football in that living room?
No.
Is that a big living room or a small living room?
It's fair size. I mean, with couches and stuff, there's not a ton of room in there, but you can still just throw a ball throughout the house.
Is it fair to say, if you're in the living room itself, that about as far as you're throwing the ball is from?
Yes.
Is that, in fact, a Nerf football in the sense that it's a soft Nerf football?
Yes.
based on throwing the football with Dylan before, is that the type of situation you would ever envision someone getting injured?
No.
Your Honor, move to strike. This witness is not an expert in ergonomics.
He's not an expert in ergonomics, but he's a human being who's played with a Nerf football. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Why did you send the pictures to your father?
To show him how I viewed him.
Objection, similar to what we were discussing this morning. Asking it that way, eliciting that answer is what 404B is meant to preclude.
Counsel asked about it, Your Honor.
You did, Mr. Moran. I think it's fair game at this point. The jury knows what they can and cannot use this information for. I've told them repeatedly, and I imagine I'll tell them again. Go ahead.
And you had previously testified, but Mr. Moran talked to you about how those pictures, you made comments that they upset you to your father, right?
Yes.
Similar for Dylan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Questions from the jury?
Now, I didn't think about that, Debs. I didn't think about it being, because here he was saying that because Mark was talking smack about the alcohol bottles and the way that Cory had left the house while he was gone, that he was, reading the riot act to Dylan about it. And Dylan's like, these are my people. These are who I live with. These are the people that I love. Like, stop talking about them like this. Meanwhile, I know what you like to do in your free time. So I didn't think about it being, something like that. But it's interesting because I had forgotten the tidbit that Cory had sent these photos to Mark and prior to this. So that was in August when that happened. And then, it kind of, I don't know, it almost really speaks to the mindset of Mark between August and November, right? Because we read the emails where he was emailing Elaine and telling her, hey, Dylan doesn't respond to me. He's not talking to me. So I'm assuming that the money I put in his account is good, etc. So Mark, I wonder if he thought there's no way Cory showed those to Dylan, or if he just automatically thought, okay, well, if Cory knows, then Dylan knows. And again, going along to the mindset of Mark, if Dylan and Cory know, Elaine knows. And like I said, in my opinion, Elaine was everything to Mark, and he felt like he lost his entire world whenever she left, because, not being mean, but Mark is not necessarily like the biggest, best prized possession, and he drove a truck. He didn't, like, he just kind of was a loner into himself, and to have lost the not to be, gross, but the vagina in his bed, that's a big thing to a man who has not necessarily had the pick of, his choosings in life. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm fully saying what I want to say there, but I really think Mark almost expected this confrontation with Dylan. I think that's what I'm trying to say. Because if that happened in August with Cory and all of this stuff just kind of snowballed and snowballed, I really feel like he anticipated this. He knew this was going to happen. He knew it was going to be a fight. And Dylan put up a fight, right? From probably stuff they were buying at Walmart to Mark wanted to go sit down at a restaurant to eat. Dylan just wanted fast food because Dylan was trying to go to his friend's house. Again, Dylan wanted to go to his friend's house. He didn't want to be there with him. And that started a little argument. So I kind of feel like Mark was expecting it. I know that was kind of far off from what you said, Debs, but yeah, this really made me kind of think about Mark's state of mind. And they might almost could have did a little premeditation with it. I know they got second degree murder and they couldn't prove that he had planned to do this, but the more and more I'm listening again a second time around, I'm kind of thinking that his mental state, his state of mind, was expecting a confrontation from his son. Does that make sense? Let's get past their little sidebar just a moment.
So the first question is when and where did they find the fishing pole? Ladies and gentlemen, I believe another witness is going to talk about that. The next question is what did you think Mr. Redwine, that Mark Redwine meant by hurt Dylan Redwine in the text exchange? That opens up a lot of issues that we're not going to deal with, and I'm not going to ask that question either. Last question I'm not going to ask is, on November 18th of 2012, was your dad aware that Dylan had seen the pictures of his dad that were presented to the jury? I don't think this defendant has a basis to know that, and this witness, excuse me. However, I do want you to answer these two questions. In your opinion, what were Dylan's options to get to Ryan's house by 6:30 in the morning on the 19th?
Mark, I think he had scheduled to meet with an attorney that following morning. So the plan was he'd go down to the attorney's office in the morning and drop Dylan off on his way into town.
All right. You stated that they, and I'm assuming that means law enforcement, searched the lake because that's where Dylan was last seen. Does that mean the actual lake or just the general area?
The actual lake and the general area. I know we started off with the general area, and then as it went further into it, then we wanted to search the actual lake.
Any follow-up on either of those?
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Redwine, I understand your answer, but I'm not sure if you understood the question as it was asked to you. So let me ask a slightly different question. The judge was asking you if they searched the lake because Dylan was seen at the lake last, or if Dylan was seen in the general area, such as at his father's house last. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we searched the lake just because he was in the general area at his father's house. So we just wanted to eliminate anywhere in that general area.
So when you answered the question the first time, you were saying they searched both the lake specifically and the general area?
Yes.
Okay. Did anyone see Dylan at the lake, or this was something that was sort of put out there related to the fishing pole, et cetera?
Yes, this is for the fishing pole, and just being in that area with not much else up there, it was a good general spot to start a search.
Are you aware if anybody ever, November 19th and November 18th, right?
Yes.
And November 19th, was Dylan ever heard from?
No.
Okay. Was he ever seen?
No.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I think it will help to have counsel put up Exhibit 23 again.
Okay.
Permission to publish
Do that,
that
please.
one more time.
Probably have to turn on the TV.
Are you aware if anybody ever?
And really quick, again, that whole fishing pole, the whole, Dylan walked off and went to his friend's house. That was all Mark, Letitia's counterpart, right? All the stories and the stuff that was brought up. And remember, you'll see here later, Mark is the one who finds the fishing pole, I believe. Initially says it's gone, it's missing. Dylan's fishing pole's missing. But yet Dylan was trying to go to a friend's house, not trying to go fishing. And it's kind of interesting. They asked what was his kind of means of transportation to get to Ryan Nava's house. And, Cory says, well, it was Mark because Mark was going to go to his attorney and blah, blah, blah. And I find it ironic because that would have been a great place, I feel, in my mind to be like, objection, hearsay, like how do you know that was what Mark was going to do? But the defense doesn't want to interrupt right there because they like the way that questioning is going. They like the way that's happening. Let's not draw any additional attention. It's real interesting to me. And yes, Debs, these kids, this trial was a long time after he went missing in 2012, and the trial took place in 21. It's just amazing to me that it took so long. Now, part of that did have to do with COVID. It really impacted the judicial system all the way around, but especially here. And that's actually why we have this video that we do, because of COVID and the courts being closed, et cetera, et cetera. So the judge had to allow the public to see it some way, shape, or form. I don't know. I guess he didn't have to, but he chose to. And this is what we got. So anyway, here we go.
And may I approach? I want to not stand in front of the jury and point at the TV.
Well, we'll watch you, Mr. Marin.
Mr. Redwine, just a couple more questions to follow up here.
You need the pointer. You're going to be in somebody's way.
Thank you. So about here is where the general store is, right?
Yes. You're blocking one juror's view just slightly. Thank you. And I know that's hard.
Approximately here is the general store where this intersection is.
Yeah, approximately.
And down about here, there was a reported sighting of Dylan on November 19th, correct?
Yes.
Objection a hearsay, Judge. And also, we're going to adjust.
So about here is where the general store is.
And really quick, just to remind you guys, in the description below is the link to the Colorado court system. You can see all of this evidence. So all of what he's putting up there on the screen, I won't show it to you guys here today, but it is in the description down below. We've went through multiple things. Now they're labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The videos are not there. There's a few things, but you can see Mark's pictures. Those are there. I want to say they're like 17, 18, and 19, I believe. I went through and kind of labeled some of them just for my own benefit, but you can see some of the evidence that they found. You can see photos of the search, photos of Mark's home, inside and out. You can see their diagram of where furniture was placed when Dylan went missing versus whenever they got in there to do their searches. But anyway, just reminding you. Hey, and if you haven't, hit that like button.
discuss this later in the trial, I'm sure.
He went over this, and it's inaccurate the way it came up with the jury.
It's
Mr.
misleading.
One at a time. You guys know that, all right? Finish your objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Moran was instructed not to inject hearsay into his questions by the court, and this is an example of unreliable hearsay. And it's something we're going to address later in the trial. But he's asking the wrong witness, and it's very misleading to the jury.
Mr. Moran.
Your Honor, Mr. Johnson asked repeatedly, had Dylan been seen or heard from again? Mr. Cory Redwine knows full well who that information came from, and why that meant that they searched this area approximately 2020 was the most side of the lake.
And it'll come in, if it comes in through a different witness. Do you have any other questions?
Yes.
Please put the microphone back, though, so we don't lose it.
Okay, pause real quick. I know a lot just happened. Woo, Gail, you was right. Judge is a little testy today, isn't he? He yelled at him. And it's funny, they're laughing and kind of, and not laughing with each other, but like, chuckling and this, that, and the other. Ooh, tensions is getting a little heated in the courtroom today. This is interesting. That judge said, enough, one at a time. I love it.
Having been at the house in the spring of 2012, you were aware that the battery on the ATV was dead, right?
I never had any issues with the battery.
When was the previous occasion you had driven the ATV prior to
Is this part of the jury's questions?
options?
Mr. Moran, is this in response to the jury's questions? That's what we're doing now.
I thought it was. If it's not one that Your Honor read, I'll leave it at that.
That's not what I remember.
Okay, that's further.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, people are going to get upset in this trial. I'm going to get upset in this trial. I'll try not to get upset with you. I'll try to get upset with these two sides equally. Please don't let it be seen or think that I hold an opinion one way or the other. And if they get upset, don't hold it against them either. It's just a very emotional case. So with that, we will take a recess till, it looks like it's 10:21 or 10:22. We'll start up at 10:37. And please don't talk about the case while you're in this recess. So everybody rise for the jury, please.
Wow. Judge said, hey, hold on a minute. I'm going to get a little mad, and I won't get mad at you. Or he even said, I'll try not to. Imagine him for Letitia's trial. That would have been interesting, right? When the guy was smoking marijuana down in the in the stairwell, judge would have got pissed. Oh, he would have been so mad. I like his tenacity that he has. It's great to me. All right. Do you guys want to continue? This wraps up Cory's testimony, and what I've done in the past is just kind of ended it, with each witness, unless it's the kind of, menial ones. But I know that we just came off of a holiday weekend, and some of you have yard work you're doing, and, poor Gail, she's having oven troubles. So do you guys want to keep going, or we can stop it here and then pick up tomorrow with a whole brand new witness? You let me know. Let me know. If you haven't already, subscribe so you'll know when we do go live again. Do you want to keep going, guys? Let me know, Gail. Let me know, Debs. We'll keep going. We've been live for about an hour and a half, so. Well, my little just got up. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Let you guys, Debs, go back. You asked if Elaine, if his mom has. Okay, good. We will go ahead and end it there. I appreciate you guys so much for being here, but go back and listen to his mom speak. That was, an interesting testimony. Cory kind of had a little bit more oomph in his, just because he was the one who found those pictures, and those pictures are being used to serve as motive. But it always breaks my heart when these moms get up there. It just is the hardest thing. Queen Petty, thank you so much, dear, for being here. Gail W., thank you so much for being here. Debs, I call you all the different things. Thank you so much for being here. Anybody else that's there and watching, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Tell somebody about Dylan. Put your arms around somebody and love them, because you may be the only one that does it on that day, and you may be exactly what somebody needs. I love you guys. Until next time, I'll see you tomorrow.